Are spring breakers really causing trouble in Florida? On today's video, we're gonna find out who is being arrested on spring break in Florida. According to law enforcement agencies in Florida, every year, thousands of spring breakers come to our quiet, safe, and peaceful state to bring violence, havoc, mayhem, and riots to our peaceful state of Florida. The runoff from their nutrient-rich clothing brings ecological destruction and red tide to the state of Florida. And for the most part, many sheriff offices in Florida have vowed to decapitate and castrate anybody who comes to Florida on spring break. But to be fair, many people believe that law enforcement in Florida is stretching things a little bit. So here's the formula for our video. We picked 3 counties in South Florida that are currently seeing spring breakers, and we only looked at all of the arrests from out of state to determine if the individuals that are being arrested in Florida are spring breakers or not. So according to law enforcement agencies in Florida, spring breakers bring a wave of crime to the state. On the other side of the spectrum is the theory that the overwhelming majority of people who are causing trouble in Florida are not spring breakers, but locals and snowbirds, and that the real reason these sheriff's offices are going after spring breakers is because they are a young demographic and that fits the state's culture wars. So spring break is still in its infancy, so we chose 3 counties that are in the southern part of the state, 3 counties that see a lot of early spring breakers because the Gulf waters are still too cold to swim in. Over the next few weeks, as water temperatures warm up, then the spring breakers will hit areas in North and Central Florida. But for now, the overwhelming majority of spring breakers are going to be in the Florida Keys and South Florida. Thus, it would be logical for the southernmost county in Florida, Monroe County, to be on the list. Monroe County is predominantly the Florida Keys. Sheriff Rick Ramsey is the sheriff down there, and he has sworn to beat spring breakers to a bloody pulp using his elderly and decrepit police force. This time of year, Fort Myers Beach is a popular spring break destination, and it is busy on Fort Myers Beach, so we've chosen Lee County, Florida as one of our experiment counties to see if we can find spring breakers being arrested. You may have seen their sheriff probably everywhere on social media. He really likes to be in front of cameras. I work in Sarasota County, and there are already spring breakers here, so it's a natural selection for me to go to Sarasota County. You've probably never seen the Sarasota sheriff on any type of news conference. He's busy keeping Sarasota as one of the safest places in Florida and doesn't have time for news conferences or Fox News. Now I can tell you preliminarily when it comes to Sarasota County that spring breakers don't get arrested here. In fact, let's find out. We'll start with Sarasota County. And remember that the formula for today's video is people who are arrested in Florida who are not Florida residents. In Sarasota County, we found a man who is 44 years old who is not a Florida resident. We're going to call him Rico. He was charged with racketeering, gambling, fraud, money laundering. He was running a gambling house. Judging by his age and the fact that he's not a Florida resident, we're going to go ahead and say he is not a spring breaker, but a snowbird who's definitely causing a racket in Sarasota. His address is listed as being from Illinois. He is not a Florida resident, so he qualifies for today's video. Obviously, he's not a spring breaker at that age. He's a gambling freaking racketeer. Many law enforcement agencies in Florida would have you believe that it's spring breakers who are coming here to cause trouble, but looking through these arrest records, the first one we found was definitely too old to be a spring breaker. And by the way, the cutoff age for spring breakers is around 35 years old, and that's being generous. Most spring breakers are going to be in their early 20s. Meet Wilma. She's 74 years old, a retired woman from Illinois as well. Now, her nationality is listed as Italian. Now, she has a lot of charges, 2 charges of leaving the scene of a crash and 2 charges for refusing to accept a citation from the officer. She was either drunk or entitled. Regardless, my question to the Sarasota Sheriff's Office is, if she's causing trouble in our community and she's not a U.S. citizen, she's listed as an Italian citizen, where is the deportation hold? If it's a Venezuelan, a Cuban, or a Latin American, when they are arrested, they're immediately placed on immigration hold. If she's not a U.S. citizen and she's causing trouble in our community, where is the immigration hold for her? So this is the issue that I ask people all the time. If it's a European and they are doing the same exact thing, they get away with it. A Latin American gets caught doing the same exact thing with the same type of legal status, they instantly get hit with a deportation. My question, the Sarasota Sheriff's Office, where is the deportation hold for her? Why are we playing favorites with Europeans? If they're not U.S. citizens and they're breaking the law, deport them. When we talk about spring breakers, we always hear the term disorderly intoxication. Well, meet Mr. Wallace from California. He came to Florida and that's what he did. Now we know he's not a spring breaker because he's listing his occupation as an underwriter. He's 35 years old. He could be a spring breaker, but we know he's not because he's got an occupation. He is listed as married. His wife can't be too proud of the idiot she shows. It's the young people that are causing trouble in Florida. Well, meet this individual from the state of Washington. Now, he's 65 years old, right? But his victim was under 12. Now, the state of Washington has a particular issue that they are kind of protecting their people. So they have some of the strictest laws for people like him, which has led to a situation where people who are registered in Washington go to Florida, Arkansas, or Oregon because they're not welcome in the state of Washington. So let's compare the state of Washington to the state of Florida. The state of Washington has said, we don't want registered people in our state. We're going to make it impossible for those types of people to live in our state because they hurt our children. The state of Florida says, hey, give us your registered offenders as long as they're elderly. That's the type of people we want in our state. What we don't want is spring breakers. Oh, those are the bad ones right there. You see the difference between what Florida is trying to get rid of versus what Washington is trying to get rid of? Here's a state, Washington, that has decided what we don't want is people who hurt children. The state of Florida, what we don't want is people who are going to college and enjoying the fact that they have a bright future ahead of them. Those are two very different things to go after. Which one do you think is making the smart choice? Florida going after spring breakers or Washington going after registered offenders? You may have noticed that an overwhelming majority of people who are registered in Florida are from Washington. Why do they leave the state of Washington? Because the state of Washington has decided to make life impossible for those types of people so their children can be safe. So where do those people come? To Florida. And what do? Find victims under 12. Would you rather live in a state that goes after registered offenders or in a state that goes after spring breakers? You let me know in the comments. Alright everybody, so that's Sarasota County as of now. In the arrest records of Sarasota County since spring break has started, there hasn't been a single person arrested in Sarasota County from another state that would match the demographics of a spring breaker. So as far as Sarasota County goes, if you're at our hotels and beaches, you're going to run into spring breakers. If you go to the Sarasota County Jail, you're going to run into old people from other states that have come to Florida to break the law, from Illinois, Washington, and New York as well. But at this point, there are no spring breakers in the Sarasota County Jail. So let's hop on over to Lee County, Florida, the Fort Myers Beach area. Now this area is very popular, particularly Fort Myers Beach, with spring breakers. And they do get wild and crazy there. However, this is also a county where they really need spring breakers because they just got hit by Hurricane Ian with a 15-foot storm surge. The businesses there are hurting desperately, and I'm sure if they decided to go after spring breakers in Fort Myers Beach, they would all starve to death because at this point they don't really have an option. Now Fort Myers is kind of an aggressive scene. They have some pretty crappy nightlife, and let's take a look and see if we can find any spring breakers being arrested in Lee County, Florida. So we looked through the same demographics, people arrested in Lee County, Florida that have an out-of-state address, and we did not find anybody who met the demographic of a spring breaker in the Lee County Jail as of now. And the Lee County beaches are packed with spring breakers at the moment. Now, we did find one person in Lee County that met the criteria of a spring breaker. This individual here, born in 1995, is about 20 years old. He has a New York address in Queens County. Shouts to everybody watching from Queens. He is charged with violating probation. I don't think this individual here is a spring breaker for a few reasons. For one, he doesn't meet the right demographic of race. We know that predominantly spring breakers are white. On top of that, he also has been arrested for violating probation. Now, could he have been violating probation from New York here in Florida? It's definitely possible, but he's still in custody. I think a spring breaker would also get bailed out. He does meet the criteria, though. He is in that age range, and he is from out of state, so he could be a spring breaker, but I do doubt it. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions. Do you guys think this guy's a spring breaker or not? I'll leave it up to you guys in the comments to decide. I think he recently moved to Florida and got in trouble here. I don't think he's a spring breaker. He does meet the location, out-of-stater, and age criteria for today's video. That's why you're seeing him. But there's a few things that make me think he's definitely not a spring breaker, like violating probation. I'm pretty sure if you're going to school, you're not violating probation. Those two things don't seem to go in the same direction. Now, you would think with as many idiots as you run into in Lee County, Florida, that they would be arresting a crap load of New Yorkers and Ohio's causing trouble. But the reality is that Lee County Sheriff's Office hasn't been arresting too many people with out-of-state addresses. They seem to be focused mostly on arresting undocumented migrants like Venezuelan, Haitians, and other people like Mexicans, and not so much on arresting snowbirds or anybody from out of state. Lee County, Florida practices police profiling, and they're looking for like two particular things: immigrants and white girls that have a crap load of drugs. So in the case of Lee County, Florida, we can say that very few people from out of state are being arrested here. So the assumption that out of town spring breakers are causing trouble here can't be proven at this moment. All right, so now we're gonna hop on down to the Florida Keys, Monroe County, where spring breakers are definitely making their impact be known. But I will have to say that the Florida Keys could be more of a profiling issue as well, because their police force is kind of elderly. Now, the Florida Keys is kind of a wild place. I think they have the option to arrest a lot of people because it's completely lawless, but they kind of choose to arrest the types of people that they would like to see arrested. That is because if you've ever been to Key West, you know it's an absolutely lawless place. It's a type of place where you're walking down the streets and people will come up to you and offer you illegal substances, even on camera. Oh, you don't believe me? No, Mota, no, bro. I'm good, bro. Is that legal in Florida? Maybe on Key West. Y'all have a good night, brother. Y'all appreciate it. Have fun, bro. Yeah. Let them know where we at, though. Where we at?
Key West, Florida.
Are you guys real? Are you a real island boy?
Island boy.
Not the fake one. The real one.
No, I'm a mountain boy.
Real one. All right, y'all. Have a good night. So let's be clear. There's a lot of crime to choose from in Key West. So if they're arresting spring breakers here, it's possibly because they choose to. Because there's plenty of options of people to arrest in the Florida Keys. But nonetheless, there are spring breakers being arrested in the Florida Keys. Let's take a look at this. Doesn't this guy just have an arrestable face? He's from Missouri, he's 21 years old, and he was arrested for a DUI in the Florida Keys. Without a doubt, this clown-looking dude from Missouri is definitely a spring breaker. And by the way, I love the high-definition photos that they do in Monroe County of these idiots. I wish more Florida counties did this. This is a 19-year-old person that was arrested in the Florida Keys. He lists his occupation as being a student, so he perhaps could be a spring breaker. But there's a detail here we can't forget, is that he lives in the Florida Keys, so he kind of got arrested in his own backyard. Then there's this specimen right here. He's 36 years old, from Wilmington, North Carolina. He was arrested for possession of the herbal essence. Now, in the Florida Keys, people do this quite a bit. In fact, it's almost impossible to breathe in the Florida Keys without smelling this. So I'm going to guess, considering that people sell this stuff openly like it's legal in the Florida Keys, that he must have been doing something to irritate this police officer. I'm going to go ahead and say he probably meets the criteria of a spring breaker, although at 36 years old, this bearded dragon is really pushing the limit of what we can define as a spring breaker. He probably thought because everybody else was doing it out in the open that he could too, but he forgot that he looks like the type of idiot a police officer would want to arrest. Now take a look at this 22-year-old from Michigan. He was arrested for possession of something green and possession of something white, and he is also a spring breaker. He also looks like a serial killer from 1977. It's hard to believe this person is this young when he looks this old, but you can see his paraphernalia face is the type of idiot that would get arrested as a spring breaker. Now this little specimen right here is a 23-year-old from Charlotte, North Carolina, and she was arrested for putting her hands on somebody else. She lists her occupation as a cleaner, but she's going to be cleaning toilets and people's underwear in the Monroe County Jail. Now, people in Charlotte, North Carolina are angry, violent, and they like to hurt other people and put their hands on other people. And if you don't believe me, here it is on video.
Get him out. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. What the? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Must be long. Oh crap! Oh crap! This is bad.
Oh my gosh.
Crap! This is bad. Hold on. So hurting other people may be normal in Charlotte, North Carolina, but that's not how we get down here in Florida. She was arrested for battery, which is basically the only thing people in Charlotte, North Carolina like to do. Meet this 32-year-old idiot from Michigan who was arrested in the Florida Keys for doing the same exact thing, putting his hands on other people. Now, he claims to be a business owner in Michigan as his occupation, but I don't see this idiot owning anything other than a crack pipe. He was arrested for battery, and I do believe he qualifies as a spring breaker for the fact that he's from Michigan like all the other idiots getting arrested in the Florida Keys, and he's 32 years old. Despite the fact he claims to be a business owner, he's a stupid spring breaker getting arrested in Florida for being stupid. If he thought he was going to go to college, the only thing he's going to go to now is freaking prison or jail, wherever the crap they put idiots like him. This 59-year-old woman from Michigan was also arrested in the Florida Keys for a DUI. So it isn't just spring breakers who are going to the Florida Keys to cause trouble. This woman right here is in her 60s almost, and she's causing trouble. Is it me, or are there a lot of idiots in the Florida Keys from Michigan? This is not the first person from Michigan we're going to talk about on today's video causing trouble in the Florida Keys. This 36-year-old idiot from Colorado was arrested in the Florida Keys. Now at 36 years old, it's really hard to label this guy as a spring breaker. It's definitely not hard to label him as an idiot. He was arrested for a DUI in the Florida Keys. This disgruntled 55-year-old New Yorker was arrested for an onslaught of possession charges in the Florida Keys, ranging from DUI, resisting an officer, green, and possession of paraphernalia. He went to the Florida Keys from New York, and he'd caused a lot of trouble. But notice that not everybody causing trouble in the Florida Keys is a spring breaker. This guy is a grown adult. He's 55 and older. Crap, he's old enough to live in a 55 and older community, but now he's going to live in an idiot community called the Monroe County Jail. He could have been in a resort having a good time, but he decided, instead of spending his money on Starbucks, to spend his money on herbal essence and paraphernalia. This is the type of idiot that we deal with here in Florida quite often, and we can see that it isn't just spring breakers that are causing havoc in the state of Florida. Many times it's people who are freaking grown adults and should know by now how to behave. I mean, crap, he qualifies to live in one of those mobile home parks for 55 and older. But instead of saving money in the Florida Keys, he decided to get in trouble, acting like a grown freaking idiot. The reality is that spring breakers do get in trouble in Florida, But there's a lot more idiots that are grown freaking adults that are causing a lot more trouble for us in the Florida Keys and throughout the entirety of the state of Florida. The notion that spring breakers bring a wave of crime to the state of Florida is a complete bullcrap statement. They're actually supporting businesses, and the overwhelming majority are just here to enjoy our culture, food, and warm weather before they go off to have a very successful life as adults who are getting an education and getting their game on. Even if spring breakers were getting arrested in Florida, in comparison to what older people are doing in the state of Florida when it comes to crime, it is insignificant, which just goes to show that the reality of Florida's culture war on spring breakers isn't based on real criminal analytics, but just a profiling prejudice, which is not a surprise for the state of Florida. It's just another of their stupid culture wars that cost businesses money, tourists not to come to our state, and people like me who live in Florida and depend on tourists to starve to death, which is probably what they want because they don't want us here. Then there's Amanda. She's also from Wilmington, North Carolina, and she also had possession of the herbal essence. Wait a minute, something's happening here. They're a couple. Okay, these two idiots got arrested together. So there you go. They got arrested as a couple. Imagine that. But wait, if they're spring breakers, why would they be a couple? That's an interesting question, because most spring breakers are not couples, because if they're going to college, what do you guys think? Are they spring breakers or not? Hard to tell. Either way, they both came from the same place and they both got the same charges and they're both arrested at the same exact location, so they definitely came to Florida together. They came on vacation and they left on probation and they didn't eat anything Haitian. They just got arrested as a freaking couple in Florida. Somebody please give these people a donation for their commissary. But my favorite spring breaker is this young lady right here. Now, she's also from Wilmington, North Carolina, and she was also arrested at the same exact location. Wow. You're telling me this bearded dragon had two females. Now look at her. She's blonde, green eyes, young, spring breaker in Florida with possession of herbal essence. This female right here is the essence of spring breaking. Just look at her. Pimples, green eyes, blonde hair. This is a specimen of a spring breaker. This is the face of spring breakers who get arrested in Florida. Now the question is, which one of these two ugly females is with the bearded dragon? Were they a group of friends from the same school, or did this ugly bearded headed looking dragon dude actually pull off to be in Florida with two females? How did this One Tree Hill from Wilmington, North Carolina end up getting arrested in Florida? All three of them got arrested with possession. Did each one of them have a little bit of green, or did all three of them get arrested and they all refused to snitch? We will never know unless we pull a body cam footage for these idiots, and they're honestly not worth my time or money, so we're not going to do that. Regardless, the One Tree Hill from Wilmington, North Carolina was arrested for possession in the Florida Keys. I'm going to assume that because all three of them are about the same age, I'm going to guess they're probably spring breakers for sure. Can we make the assumption then that spring breakers do bring crime to Florida? Well, we recently had a bike week in Volusia County, Florida, and we saw biker gangs get into shootouts. So anytime you have large events and large crowds, there's a potential for somebody to get arrested. Are they more propense than other people to get arrested? They are partying, and that's kind of the setting where people would end up getting arrested more likely than not. So I would say, to be honest and fair, I don't believe that spring breakers are a wave of crime in Florida. Are there more arrests of spring breakers than regular people? Sure. The same thing would happen with a bike week, a boat week, or any other type of event that attracts large numbers of vacationers. It isn't that spring breakers are causing trouble in Florida. It is that the state of Florida is on another one of its culture wars against young people. The state of Florida doesn't like young people. It likes old people, and that is why spring break is being targeted by these law enforcement agencies. Overall, spring breakers do more good than harm to the state of Florida, but try to convince these old racist white people in Florida that these young kids who have a bright future ahead of them are here to have a good time, are not a bunch of thriving criminals set on destroying the state of Florida. In reality, the biggest problem really facing Florida right now is the amount of DUIs and hit and runs, and even leaving the scene of a crash causing a death is a huge thing here in Florida. And the demographic that's doing this the most is usually people in their 50s. A lot of them are here from other states like snowbirds. That's a real concern to the state of Florida. But the state of Florida, again, is more focused on its culture wars, like going after immigrants, people working in agriculture. And let's not forget now spring breakers. Oh, let's not forget the homeless. The homeless do engage in a lot of criminal activity, to be fair. But spring breakers, I really can't agree on that. I think any group of people coming to vacation to your state are going to have some arrests here or there. Are they a wave of crime? No, they're not. It's just another one of Florida's countless cultural wars that hurts the state, hurts the economy, hurts the people, but it really raises the ego of these police officers who go on these rants talking about, we're going to get them, they took our jobs. I mean, to be real, for every one spring breaker that I saw arrested, I had to scroll past like 15 people in their 50s arrested for DUIs, leaving the scene of a crash and crimes of the like. Seems like the big problem in Florida has more to do with people in another age demographic. Of course, the overdoses in Florida are also in that demographic. But again, the state of Florida doesn't look at logic. It looks at profiling, who they don't want here. And if you're a young person in Florida, you know they don't want you here to begin with. Again, a pointless cultural war that hurts the state, hurts the economy. But this is what the state of Florida is concerned with. Spring breakers. Absolutely pathetic. 64 years old from Michigan, arrested in the Florida Keys for battery. Not everybody that's involved in crime in Florida is a spring breaker. In fact, people of this age demographic of the 50s and 60s are definitely contributing much more crime to Florida than the demographic of the spring breakers, but nobody's going after these people. Yes, there are spring breakers being arrested in Florida, but for every one spring breaker arrested, there's like 3 or 4 people of an older demographic who did roughly about the same exact thing. A woman from Michigan comes to Florida to break the law. A man from Michigan comes to Florida to beat other people up. I mean, honestly, after reviewing these 3 counties' arrest records, if we were going to be realistic about a clickbait title coming out of Florida right now, people from Michigan coming to Florida to break the law in their 50s and 60s would be a much more realistic news story than spring breakers. But as you guys know, everything on the internet is a clickbait, and they don't want to hear about this. They want to hear about spring breakers.